that you're being recorded. And just to give you some kind of like how this is going to work today, there's only 3 people signed in. So actually, if you want to speak or use your microphone or anything, that's absolutely fine. We say please mute yourselves if it's a bigger group, because otherwise you can end up with background noise and things like that. It's less important when there's a smaller group. A couple of you have already found the chat option. If you look at the bar across the center, you've got your camera, your microphone, the sharing thing, but please don't share any slides at the moment. I'm going to do that myself. You can probably see a little hand. That works really, really well. If you do have anything you want to say or you want to ask a question, just click on that little raised hand icon if you've got it. I know we've found that not everybody does have it. It depends what kind of client you're using, how up-to-date your software is, that kind of thing. But if you have got it, it works really, really well just to raise that, and I can see that you want to say something. Alternatively, feel free to continue to use the chat box there. You can also see Georgina, who's my colleague from Beckett Careers. So I think she might be answering some of your questions in the chat as well as we go along. So we have planned this to have a little bit of, actually I'll put my camera on as well so you can see me. We have planned this to have a little bit of interaction. So I will be asking you some questions and asking you to think about things. So if you can do that, so much the better. So starting off with, I would like you to think about making a list of everything that you've done so far that's relevant to your career development. So that might be some of the things that you've thought specifically, okay, I'm doing this because I want to develop my career, or I want to know more about this area, or this is going to be good for my career. But it can also include some of the things that you've just done because you didn't do them because they're career things, you just did them because you needed to get a job, so you got a job, or you wanted to volunteer, so you did some volunteering, or other people you knew were doing this, so you got involved in this project, those kinds of things. So just think, what are some of the things that you've done so far that's relevant to your career development that might help you get a job in the future? I'm just going to give you a few minutes to think about that. And if you've got a pen and a paper to write them down, or you can just open up another window and write a few notes, even better. Okay, so I would like you now to just either in the chat box, or if you want to, you can actually say it out loud. Your name and your course. Just tell me one thing that's on your list, and then whether or not you have a dream job at the moment. Not whether you have the dream job, but whether you have a dream job in mind. So if anybody wants to do that speaking, then you just let me know by putting your hand up, or you can just join in, or you can just type that in the type it in the chat box. Georgina, do you have a dream job? You're on mute.
I am. Well, my dream job changes all the time, but yeah, I'd actually quite like to own a string of properties that I can then rent out as Airbnbs. That would be a good one, and then I can visit them all the time.
Sounds a bit of a dream lifestyle as well.
Yeah.
So we've got, Victoria's got a freelance videography business, starting to get everything set up. Francesca in events management, just completed your placement year, great. And Marcus, you've got a portfolio website and you want to work in video game audio. Okay, thank you very much. That's kind of quite a good range of things there.
Yeah.
All of you kind of quite creative areas though, that's good. And Victoria's been doing filmmaking, great. Okay, thank you. So now we know who you all are. So this is the model that we're working with today. And these are 4 areas for you to think about when you're thinking about doing your career development and your career planning. And what are these 4 areas that you need to be thinking about to do that successfully? Oops, so I just lost my slides there. Sorry. So the first one well, I'll think I'll do them in reverse order. So the fourth one is down here at the bottom, capability. That's the one that probably everybody associates with careers. So that's the actually, how do you get a job? How do you write a CV? How do you get ready for interview? How do you, if you're thinking about running your own business, how do you put together a business plan or apply for funding? Those kinds of things. Clarity is what we're focusing on today. So it's being able to think about what you've done and your planning process. So it's kind of like the whole kind of process of careers in time, thinking about what you've done, reflecting on that, understanding what you've learned from it, what you know about yourself, what you know about the word and you'd like to do, and figuring out from that information, what are you going to do with it next? How are you going to put something into action that takes you a bit further along? And then the top two are the ones that we kind of don't necessarily think about as much. Courage is that one where you've really just got to get out of your comfort zone and you've got to talk to new people. You've got to do something that puts you in a new space or a new environment where you're going to find out some of the new things that you need to know. And that might be things like doing some work experience, it might be doing a placement, it might be going out and talking to some new people. Again, if you, Victoria, thinking about doing your own business, it might be kind of about building that network, going to networking events or just talking to people who might be useful, chasing up leads, starting to talk to new people. And then curiosity is the bit where you're thinking about, what is it that I need to know? If this is my idea, if this is where I want to go next, or if this is the kinds of areas that I'm thinking about, how would I practically do that? What would I need to know? Even if I just want to kind of make some decisions, if I'm thinking about working in this particular area, how does that actually work? So Marcus, thinking about that video game audio, what would you need to know? What do you already know about working in that area? What would you need to know? What kind of companies would you work for? What kind of qualifications do you need? What kind of portfolio would you put together, and who would you want to see that portfolio? Again, just the kinds of like the sort of the stuff that you don't know at the moment. So thinking about today, this session particularly is about thinking kind of a bit more acutely about your planning and what are some of the things you're going to do next. We're going to use this model a little bit to kind of identify what are some of the areas that would be really useful for you next. So when people start thinking about what they want to do with their careers and what you want to do next, people start with all sorts of different ways of making those decisions. We talk about as if it's quite an easy, straightforward thing. So sometimes we talk about as like, oh, well, you know, obviously, if you're doing this degree, you're going to go on to this area. For the vast majority of students, there isn't an obvious place to go from your degree. I think we say something like 80% of jobs that graduates get aren't related to your degree subject, or they don't care what your background degree subject of. And obviously that 20% that does care includes things where it really, really matters, like medicine, nursing, where you have to have a particular degree in order to get the job. So for the vast majority of people, you've got a really wide open field in terms of what you can do next, what you can do with that degree. So it really comes down to thinking about, what do you want to do? What are you interested in? And what are you excited about? So people make that decision in all sorts of different ways. For some people, they've always known what they want to do. For some people, they don't know what they want to do, but they absolutely know what they definitely don't want to do. And I find that's a really good starting point sometimes. If you can tell me that you definitely don't want to do this job, students often say things like, well, I definitely don't want to work in an office, or I definitely don't want to be a teacher. That's actually a pretty good starting point to think about. Okay, so when you say you don't want to do that, so let's talk about why not, because that's quite a good starting point for thinking about what you do want. You might be somebody like, you don't know what you want to do, but you know what kind of lifestyle you want. You know that it's quite important to you to have a stable job, or to earn a lot of money, or to be in an artistic environment. You know what kind of space you like to be in. I like to work with these kinds of people. And it's important to me that I'm able to help people, or it's important to me that I want to work with creative people, or it's important that I want to work with really clever people who are doing some really interesting brand new things, or have to do something new every day. So whatever your starting point is, that's okay. Just dig into that a little bit more and think about what it is that you're prioritizing and what you might want to do from there. If you're still at the stage where you want to explore different ideas, these are some useful resources for you to look at. Prospects Planner. So this is on the Prospects website, which is prospects.ac.uk. Prospects Planner is a quiz that you can do that can help you think about, again, asks you lots of different questions about what kind of work you want to do, whether you like this kind of work, whether you like that kind of work, whether you'd like to be in this environment, that environment. Again, some of those questions you'll have very definite answers, some of them are a little bit more vague. They also have job profiles on there. So if you do know what you want to do, going and looking at the prospect job profiles, each job profile has a little bit about what that job is, what qualifications you need to do it, what kind of salary you can expect, what the career path might be, what kind of organisations you'd work for, what kind of skills they'd look for. That's a really good point if you've got some ideas, but you don't know exactly what that looks like, just to get some ideas of like, get a bit more detail about it. It also gives you some links for going and doing further exploration of a different thing. And it also gives you kind of some related jobs. So if you have some ideas, but you want to know, okay, if what else can I do that's like this, that's in this area, then it can help you with that. My Hub has careers pathways and career quizzes. Career pathways are little videos of people talking about their own jobs, their own careers, how they got into this area, how they moved over into another area, those kinds of things. So again, it's very, very good for helping you think about how you might move from one area to another and kind of getting a bit more exploration. They're all sorted into different sectors. So if you want to look at people who are working in the arts or who are working in the social sector or something like that, you can go and do that. And My Hub also has the career quizzes, which again are the same as the prospects planners. They ask you lots of questions about what you're like, what kind of things you want to do. Again, with those kinds of quizzes, the answer, I think, is less important than what the things that you think about whilst you're doing it. Like, we don't really want to see anybody say, well, I became a funeral director because the computer told me to when I did a quiz in 2020, 30 years ago. But the questions that it asks whilst you're doing it can be really useful for helping you reflect in a bit more detail on the kind of stuff you need to think about. Unfortunately, I couldn't include the links to that because when I was doing this, the internet wasn't working. But if you go to myhub.leedsbeckett.ac.uk/s/careers, you should be able to find the careers pathways and the careers quizzes straight from there. And prospects is prospects.ac.uk. Okay, so I wanted to kind of give you some suggestions then of thinking about what sorts of things would be useful for you to do next and how you might do them. Before we go into this, do any of you know, what would you say is the next thing that you want to do at the moment? What's the most important thing for you to think about in terms of how you develop your ideas or find opportunities or make decisions? What are some of the things that you think you like? If you had to say what's your big priority at the moment, what would you want to know? Building up skills. Thank you, Marcus. So Victoria, building networks. So getting more experience and finding clients. Marcus, you've said there that building up your skills is your next thing. Have you started to do much research into where the jobs are for video game audio? What kind of companies you might be working for? What that looks like in practice? Victoria, thinking about building networks. I don't know if you signed into either of the sessions I did yesterday. I did one about how to use LinkedIn to build networks and find new connections, and another one that was a little bit about virtual internships, which was actually about getting wide work experience and building networks more generally. So both of those might be useful if you want to think about how you can start finding people to contact and make initial contact with people, just to sort of really have those initial conversations. And I think one thing about networking is that I used to work with a lot of colleagues in sales, and one thing I really learned from the salespeople I worked with is that initial contacts work really well when you just go in there with a kind of like, oh, I'd like to get some more information and I'd like to explore something and I'd like to find out how you work, rather than, oh, I'm going in here hoping you're going to be a client or hoping you're going to buy something from me. So if you have a look at the LinkedIn session yesterday, there's some ideas there of just sort of starting to think about when you want to have sort of initial conversations with people and you want to start networking, how you do that in a really kind of open and interested way, where you've just got some things that you want to find out, and that really helps you kind of have an authentic and meaningful conversation with people, rather than trying to go into those conversations with an idea of what you're hoping to get out of them. So one of the things I'm sort of thinking about here is, so some of the things that you might want to do if you're focusing on that kind of curiosity stage and finding out more about the areas that you want to work in the moment. It sounds like most of you have started to think about identifying the sectors that you're curious about, what you want to do. Have you started to research organisations that actually work in that area? Have you found if there are any relevant professional organisations, or started to look at job descriptions? Even if these aren't jobs you're ready to apply for right now, they might be things that, you know, just to sort of starting to look at what kind of jobs are available and what kind of skills they're looking for. So for something like the video game audio, Marcus, I don't know if you've started to look at what some of the entry-level jobs are. Do you go straight in as a video game audio designer, or do you start off with perhaps a more general role, or perhaps a audio assistant, or a kind of baseline editor where you just get a sort of a small part of it to look at? Just starting to understand the people who are doing the work that you admire. What was their first job? Where did they start from? How did they just get into the place where they were in that environment? They could find out a bit more about what's going on and start to understand how to move into the higher level jobs. I don't know if there were many professional publications and things for video game and audio yet. I know there's quite a lot of video games journalism. There's definitely a lot of one of those creative technology jobs doesn't even have one route in. So sometimes it really is a case of, like, you know, the initial job is quite a lot about kind of making the tea and bringing the coffee and, you know, just getting to be in that environment and that kind of thing. These are the kinds of things where some of the tech networking events that take place in Leeds can be really, really good, just for giving you an opportunity to go and talk to people and have conversations with them about how did they get in there, how did that start out. Georgina, printer going, or something is.
Yeah, sorry, I'm trying to turn my audio.
But yeah, tech also, obviously, those kind of creative sectors also have a lot of kind of online forums and things like that. So again, are you kind of taking part in some of those kind of conversations, whether they're on Reddit, whether they're on private boards, those kinds of things, just to sort of see what people are doing? And as I've said, I did a session yesterday on how you can use LinkedIn to research. You can actually see people's career paths. You can see the kinds of organizations they are working for or have previously worked for. And that can be really, really useful too. So these are some of the kinds of questions you might want to think about when you're talking to people, just to kind of understand how things work. There's a lot of stuff going on here, and I'm not going to go through all of this here. But again, starting to get more of an idea of what it might look like to work in that area and where you can do that. And so then when you're thinking about how you might start networking, you know, that can start out with things like going to an employer event, and then the next step up is actually being able to ask an employer event, carrying out an informational interview just to start making contacts with people. The other thing about doing those kind of informational interviews is that if you strike it off with somebody and you kind of build up a rapport, that's a great opportunity to ask for the next level. So is there any chance I could sit in on some of the meetings that you have, or when things are a bit more back to normal, could I come into the office just to see what you do for a day? Is there any chance I could get some work experience with you? It's just you can kind of create that initial contact with people, ask them some good questions. That's a great opportunity to start building up to the next level of thing. Are there any projects I could do with you? Could you let me know if you have any work or you see any opportunities for me? Those kinds of things. And then you might want to be thinking about some of the capability things. So some of the things you actually need to do to be able to get that. So Victoria, for you, that kind of prepared elevator pitch is probably something that will be really, really useful when you want to start expanding your business. Thinking about how do you introduce yourself in a kind of comprehensive, this is who I am, this is what I do, this is what I think is unique or different about my business that will hopefully help me stand out a little bit. This is what I'm offering to you. It's just something that helps you present yourself very professionally. And again, lets people know what it is that you're doing and why they should be interested in talking to you, how they can help you. So that's giving you a few ideas of different things you might want to be thinking about doing next. What I'd like you to do now, just in these last few minutes, is to actually think about, if you were going to make a plan for what you're going to do over the next few weeks, what would you focus on? Oops. Sorry, my computer's just moved away from that. Which would be the ones that you would focus on? So I'm just going to give you a few minutes to think about that. Or a few seconds rather, probably not whole minutes. And then I'd like you to think about, if you're going to do some formal action planning, and give yourself some specific targets and some specific goals to go through. Of some of the stuff that we've talked about, I would say at a maximum, pick 3 things that it would be useful for you to do now. But if some of those are quite big, like, starting to contact people, what is the very first step of that? Before you can contact people, perhaps you want to make a list of people you need to contact. Perhaps you need to do some research into where you can go and meet people you want to contact, or actually do some research on LinkedIn to find people. So think about what's some of the stuff you'd like to do, and then think about what the first 1 or 2 steps of that would be. And then answer for yourself, when will you do it? Realistically speaking, is that something that you could expect yourself to do this week, or is it something you're going to commit to doing before the end of July? And once you've got that first action, or 2 or 3 actions, just that first few steps done, when are you going to follow up, or when would you like to have completed this, or got to a stage where you've done the initial things, you've perhaps made a list, you're going to start sending emails out, or you're going to follow up with people, or you're going to make sure that you actually manage to publish that portfolio, whatever it might be, that's kind of like the end point. So I'd like you to just kind of take a couple of minutes and sketch down, no more than a side of A4 and maybe about sort of 7 or 8 bullet points, 2 or 3 big things that you'd like to commit to over the next few months. And then underneath those, perhaps 2 or 3, just kind of like, right, what's the first step? What's the second step? When am I planning to have this done by? So you can do that privately for yourself. If anybody's got anything that they want to put into the chat box to say, right, yes, this is definitely what I'm going to do. Sometimes it can help just to kind of like, none of us here are going to be checking up on you, but sometimes just making that a little bit public can help with your motivation and your sense that you're definitely going to get it done. But whether you do it now or you do it later on today, just commit to kind of getting 2 or 3 things down on paper, along with a bit of a timeline for when you're going to do it. And that will really help move you along. Is there anything else you want to add before we wrap up, Georgina?
Yes, sorry about my printer. Yeah, I think this is all very kind of pertinent to me, actually, just even planning over the summer. I've just found the whole thing quite overwhelming, a bit like, you might going into looking for your first job or your next move. But I found that writing huge lists and just kind of breaking things down into really small chunks. So this by Friday, this by the end of next month, really small manageable chunks just makes the whole thing a lot less daunting, and having those really specific things to do, maybe contact 3 people next week, sign up for this course by the end of the month. Just breaking it down, I think, really helps.
It
and
also gives you that sense of achievement when you can actually tick a few things off, doesn't it? Even though you haven't done the whole thing, you can say, right, I did actually make my list of people that I'm going to contact, and I've ticked 6 of them off. I've done something.
Absolutely.
Okay, I'm gonna. Is there anything else you wanted to add, or I switch the recording off now?
Not from me, but
Okay.
I mean, any of the guests, turn your audio on and ask if you want. That's fine. You don't have to use the chat.
Okay, I'm going to bring the recording to an end now.